Hello and welcome to Going to College, a special education podcast brought to you in association with QQI. I'm Rob O'Hanrahan, and this two-part series will bring you through the Leaving Cert results, the trends, the issues, and most importantly, what happens next, including preparing you for college life. On episode 1, I am delighted to be joined by QQI CEO Padraig Walsh and Aoife McArdle, Guidance Counsellor at the Institute of Education. Aoife, I'm going to start with you. This is a red letter day in the calendar. I think Ireland is quite unique in that regard internationally, but it's a huge day really for students, for teachers, for everyone around those students who've gotten them through the last few years.
Absolutely, yeah, it's a big day. It really is, as you say. And I think in Ireland particularly it is unique the way we handle it all. It's changed a lot since you and I got our results. Students are getting them on the portal at home now, which can take away a bit of the hype. I think it can be a little bit easier. And again, I suppose they're making sure to calculate up, they're getting grades, so they have to calculate up their points, their best 6 results to calculate their overall points, remembering that there's 25 points for higher level maths with a H6 or above. So yeah, and then there's been, I think, really great results this year, and I think students were afraid of cliff edges and all that kind of thing, and it doesn't seem to have been the case. I think by and large I'm hearing that students are really delighted with the results this year.
Yeah, and I suppose, Padraig, to look at that, we're 3 years on from the heavily impacted COVID Leaving Cert, but grade inflation is still really the dominant trend in this year's result, and I think almost 3/4 or 71% of grades were moved up this year following Minister Norma Foley's pledge only last month that there would be no difference and no negative depreciation in this year's results. That's going to have an impact this year, that grade inflation.
Well, what the Minister committed to is that the grade profile will be similar to last year, which means really we're probably looking at things that are similar to last year. So if the grade profile is similar, the kind of average score is similar. And although you can never tell because points go up and down, even and happened before COVID, you shouldn't expect to see too much change if the comparison is between this year and last year. I mean, the difficulty, although COVID is receding for us, is that the students that are coming through were impacted significantly in their study. It's not just those that would have sat the leaving in 2020. It's this cohort of students themselves would have in almost all cases didn't sit a state examination. So that was a challenge. I think that was part of the Minister's kind of fear around this and why she committed to the grade profile being the same. But it does mean that we have to go back to 2019 to what people would consider a normal Leaving Cert. And that long term is going to cause a challenge. If you want to get back to there, you have to find a way of getting back to there. If you don't want to do it on a cliff edge, you have to do it gradually. If you do it gradually, it's probably another 4 years, in which case you have about 8 years where it's hard to compare. And that's just a challenge in the system.
And I suppose the knock-on impact of that, Aoife, when we look at, say, for example, going on to third level education, and this week some academics have drawn the line between an increase in a dropout rate at third level and this grade inflation, saying that it creates false expectations. Is that fair to say?
I don't think it is really, because we're still seeing the students with the highest grades, get into those places. So it doesn't really matter what the points are. You're still getting the top students getting into the high point courses. So I don't really agree with that. And I think, they said that during COVID there were very few dropouts because universities put on extra supports. And so if they're finding a dropout rate, maybe they need to put on extra supports for students. And I think we really need to look at the housing crisis and how that's impacting on students. We're seeing students now either working huge numbers of hours to pay their rent, or indeed commuting for up to 5 hours a day. So I think there's a lot more to it than blaming the grades.
Yeah, and even with that large grade inflation, I suppose, Padraig, you kind of made that point there, and Aoife referred to it as well, that this will affect predominantly the higher point achievers, up the more the 600 into the 625s.
Yeah, I mean, I've done some analysis on this. If you want to look at a course, for instance, like law and UCD, to get into that, you have to get in the top 10% of Leaving Cert students. You did in 2019, and you have done every year since. The points have gone up, but to get in still, the cutoff point then goes up. So your achievement profile has to be similar in those particular cases. The problem is when you get to bunching near the top, when you're looking at the people that are getting 6 H1s. The numbers of those that you had back in 2019 were a couple of hundred. It's now over 1,000, and the problem there is that you get a rationing of places. But we have to remember that that's a small number of people. For most students, they don't see that particular impact, but it does get a lot of focus.
It does get a lot of focus, and I suppose when you think about it, Aoife, when we do have that many students on that high points for only a limited number of college places, then this issue of random selection comes into it, and really it does exactly what the name says in the tin, doesn't it?
It does, but it is very unfair. When a student gets 625 and it's random selection, when they get 625, they can literally have done no more. So that's a really unfortunate situation to be in. And we found in 2021 there were quite a few courses with 625 random selection, and that reduced just down to dentistry last year. And it'll be really interesting to see this year what it'll be. But they are endeavouring to address that.
Yeah, and I suppose if someone doesn't make those high cut-off points, or if they find themselves the unfortunate victim of that random selection, there are a number of other ways to get into these types of courses, be it law or be it medicine, and those high points courses. Padraig, could you talk us through some of them?
Yeah, most of the colleges have other routes in, and there is a PLC route that lots of people take. We talk about CAO coming out next week when the points come out, but what's called round 1. But in fact, there's a round 0. So most of the colleges set aside a certain percentage of the course for people that have gone to do a PLC course in further education college and get a QQI award. And that means that a person has an opportunity to get through in that route by applying in that case. Normally, in that case, what their equivalent score, because the QQI score is made of, will be lower than what's required to get in. But what's important in those cases is that, first of all, the student has an extra year, is more mature, and in general has taken a cognate course. So, for instance, if they do a nursing PLC program, you have a fair idea from that as to whether you really have an aptitude. You can't study nursing in secondary school. And what's been found is that the persistence level and the completion level for those students is often very good, which is why the colleges have set aside those schools. So there are opportunities to get through other than through the Leaving Certificate.
So all those people on social media telling me that Leaving Cert is not the be all and end all, they are telling the truth.
They are. I mean, they are absolutely telling the truth. And as people will say, in a number of years' time, people will never ask you what you got in your Leaving Cert. Today it matters. It matters to people. But then when you finish college, that matters. But then people, years later, will never ask you what you got in your undergraduate degree either.
The point system, I think, Aoife, can confuse quite a lot of people, because I suppose the universities aren't setting these points and the number of points that you're required to get into them. So how are those points set? How do colleges and how do the CAO really come to that realisation and that exact points total you need to get over the line?
Okay, to get an offer, you need to get 3 things. The first one is the college requirements. So each college will set its own requirements. UCD is 2 H5s and 4 06s or H7s, and Trinity would be 3 H5s, 3 06s, H7s. So you need to get that first. The second one would be a course requirement. So, for example, engineering, for the most part, would need a H4 in maths, or veterinary science requires a H5 in chemistry, this kind of thing. And then after that, it's the points. So all those people who met those first 2 criteria go in a line in order of merit. So you have the 625 students at the front, then followed by the 613 or whatever. And then if I have 100 places in my course, I literally count down 100 places, and the points that 100th person got, that's my points for this year. So it's going to be the top candidates. So it doesn't matter so much what those points are, as long as they're in the top profile.
Okay. So kind of, I suppose, Padraig, that's effectively, it's a supply and demand system, really.
It is, and those points go up and down every year. This occurred before COVID, and the reason they go up and down is they go up and down with demand. Sometimes people will say, say after the pandemic there was a greater interest in science course. If more people apply, the chances are that more of those some of those will have scored higher, and therefore the points cut-off is higher than the previous year. Other courses go out of fashion. When the construction industry, when the crash occurred, the points for civil engineering, construction studies all went down. It's literally a supply and demand situation. The colleges don't set the points. The points are effectively set by the student's application and their performance in the Leaving Cert exam.
And Aoife, it's interesting, Padraig mentions there this idea of science courses rising after the COVID-19 pandemic. And I suppose in recent years we've also seen, say for example, environmental sciences seeing a boost with more focus being put on the climate emergency. And I'm wondering, anecdotally, from your own interactions with students this year, has there been any courses that have really started to maybe come to the fore?
As Padraig said, science is huge, and we've seen the points go up for that. I guess our school really attracts very high achieving students and very hard working students. So we would always have a large cohort for those top courses like the economics and finance, the medicine, dentistry, those kind of courses. So that would year on year pretty much stay the same for us. But we have seen definitely in the last few years increased numbers interested in science and possibly medicine too.
It's an interesting one, Padraig, isn't it? That I suppose what's happening out in the real world and outside the classroom in a way has such an impact on where students go.
It does, and I mean the difficulty and the challenge there is what you're doing is you're making a decision on where you go based on the current situation. But in most cases, it'll be 4 years before the market occurs. Where in some cases, I mean, there's obviously a construction boom at the moment, so it's hard to get engineers. So I mean, honestly, people should, in my view, you should choose the things that you're interested in, that you like, because you'll do better if you're doing that, rather than picking a subject because you think it's going to get you a job. To be honest, that's my tip to anybody.
Yeah. I suppose that there are so many options available now to people. So outside maybe the traditional maybe CAO or even the level 8s into the level 7s and level 6s. For anyone maybe, Aoife, who might be a little bit kind of lost after getting their results, and maybe if they haven't gotten the CAO offer that they're looking for, what would the best advice be for people like that?
I would say to speak to a guidance counsellor, because we have that expertise to talk them through the different options, but there really are so many options. As Padraig said, there's the QQI, the level 5s and 6s that they can apply directly to the colleges. There'll be available places on CAO. There's UCAS clearing, there's private colleges. There's the tertiary degrees that are open right up until at the end of September for applications. So really, there's never been a better time to be in that position, because there really are so many options. But I would just, I commiserate with those students, because I think the really high, the really happy students, we hear a lot from them today or in these days, and maybe a student who hasn't performed as well as they'd hoped. I really feel for them, but I'd really encourage them to get in touch with their guidance counsellor, and that's what we're there for, to help them through that process.
Can I ask, actually, just you mentioned tertiary degrees. I think a lot of people may not realise what exactly they are, or that the applications are open now for another 4 or 5 weeks. What exactly is a tertiary degree? A
tertiary degree is, Padraig, you might be better on this, but they're generally in the rural areas, and they're sort of an earn as you learn kind of an apprenticeship style degree, where normally in a QQI PLC, you wouldn't be guaranteed a place in college from the off, whereas in this one you are. So you're entering into a level 8 programme, but starting off in a further education college and finishing off then guaranteed, as long as you pass your exams, a level 8 degree.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, they're called tertiary degrees because they're a mix of further and higher education. So someone starts off in a further education college and then progresses into higher education. The current system before we had these was that people, and what I've explained previously, is that people could do a PLC, which is a further education course, but there was no guarantee that would get you into, say, if you want to do nursing, for instance. Under these new tertiary programs, so long as you pass the examination at the end of the first year or the second year, you're guaranteed a place in the higher education institution. There are limited numbers. There's only 500 places this year because it's new that's gone through. As Aoife said, they're predominantly being offered in the new technological universities outside Dublin. So it will be possible, for instance, for a student in Donegal to start their nursing course close to home if they live in Donegal, do their first year there, and then move on to the Atlantic Technological University course, either in Sligo or in Galway in that case. This is an initiative really of the Minister, Minister Harris, this year, and the idea is to try and expand this, to take, I suppose, some of the heat out of the the CAO system that's there. So it'll be interesting to see how it works through. And as Aoife said, applications are still open in those and will be open after the CAO allocations have been made as well.
It's an interesting pathway, I think, for students who maybe at the moment feel like there's nothing there for them in the traditional CAO route.
Absolutely, and it also addresses the problem of accommodation for students who live outside of Dublin. So yeah, it's an excellent option.
I might ask as well, Aoife, I suppose there is a land obviously beyond these shores, and for anyone who may be looking internationally but hasn't done anything as of yet, now, not to mix a metaphor, but has that ship sailed for them for this year, or can they still apply?
No, the ship hasn't sailed for the UK anyway, for UCAS clearing, so it would be similar to available places with the CAO. So it would be too late for certain courses, absolutely, they'd be full, but there are still a large number of places on UCAS clearing and they can still apply for that. In terms of Europe, you'd really be looking at applying for next year.
But still an option, I suppose, for many people.
And it's an option that people have taken in areas like veterinary medicine and dentistry before. A lot of students study in the Czech Republic or in Hungary, and that's now being realised, the challenge of that. There are more Irish graduates graduate from overseas university in veterinary medicine than graduate in Ireland. So there has been a decision this year to start expanding those number of places and to offer more of them at home. And just like we were talking about earlier on the supply and demand side, if there are more places, there's a chance that the points will get depressed because it's the same number of students chasing a larger number of places from that. But that won't happen for a number of years, those new programs.
Actually, they can still apply to study medicine, veterinary dentistry in Poland. That's still open. I'd forgotten that.
Right, okay. Yeah. One last thing that I want to look at before we finish up is, I suppose, these documents that students will have received with their Leaving Cert results, they're not finalised. So there is still an appeals process. How straightforward is it, Aoife, for someone to, I suppose, if they see a grade on that sheet that they don't think is an accurate reflection of how they did on the day?
Extremely straightforward. So they can go onto their candidate self portal and apply to view their script. They can look through it with a fine-tooth comb and then apply to have it appealed. And after the appeals, then it's an extremely robust process. It's really very clear and robust. After that, then the Leaving Cert will be finalised. So we'll see lots of students' grades change after the appeals process.
And Padraig, despite the fact that we know that no student's grade was downgraded as a result of the adjustments that were made in regards to, I suppose, keeping things at the same level, but regardless of that, if someone was to say, for example, have a grade that isn't a fair one, and they know it by looking at it, they look at the script, they believe it's not a fair one, there is a chance for them, for those points to be taken into consideration in a few weeks' time, even if their course has maybe started.
Yes, and there are a number of rounds of the CAO. So after round one, where the offers are made, a certain number of students don't take the offer for other reasons, which means that those places are open to other people that are coming through. And that goes through as well until the appeals process. So there's a chance that a student, if they go up on appeal, will then be offered the particular place. It really depends on the programme that they're doing, because they will be starting late. In some cases, that's more difficult than others. If you're doing a laboratory-based subject, for instance, where you would have to have already started some practical, it may be more difficult for someone to take up the place. And they, in most cases, will be offered that place next year. But in other cases, it will be possible. The student has to make a decision as to whether they believe they can catch up. But in some cases, they can if they want to do that. A lot of times, people would say, I want to go through with my class cohort. So there is a bit of a gap, but it's not impossible to bridge.
And Aoife, just in relation to that, I think students can appeal without having viewed their script, but they can see each individual script for each of their exams that they've sat, and they can go through it and see exactly what marks they got, where they didn't get them. How important is it to, I suppose, go in and look at that script before making your decision to appeal?
So, Rob, most exams are corrected online now, so they can view them online, and there's a short window to do that, and it does clash with Electric Picnic, so I can imagine that there'll be a lot of students somewhere in Electric Picnic with their phones out viewing their scripts. But yeah, they can do that, and they can view their scripts online. Any that were corrected manually, they would have to go into school for. So again, I'd imagine there'd be some parents popping down to Stradbally to give lifts to their leaving certs to come back up to view their scripts. So, but yeah, it's a really good process. It's so transparent and fair, and I'd really encourage students to look at their scripts.
Taking a break from the main stage to go and have a look at your English paper too.
Yeah.
Not really the EP experience I can remember.
No.
Padraig, just before we finish up, is there any other advice that you would like to give that maybe hasn't been mentioned so far, just for particularly when it comes to, I suppose, looking at your Leaving Cert results, looking at your CAO results?
It sounds easy to say this, but this doesn't change your life. And, you know, if you didn't get what you want, there is always a chance to go back and do this exam again. A year seems like an awful long time, but over the course of your life, 1 year won't make a huge difference. There are tons of people I know, myself, who, you know, didn't get what they wanted, went off, did a PLC program, and are now qualified in what they've done, and have probably forgotten at this stage that it took them an extra year to do it. So it's really important to value what you've done, your achievement to date on it, and this won't determine your life. It's easy to say that, but it is actually true.
Yeah. I suppose it's probably the best way to finish it up, Aoife.
Absolutely, and you're so much more than your Leaving Cert results. You know, it doesn't define you. It doesn't make you a good or a bad person. These young people have had such a disruption in their education, and the resilience and the maturity and the determination that they've shown is really, really inspiring, to be honest with you. So well done to them, and very best of luck to them, and to remember that there are so many options, and to get in touch with their guidance counsellor.
Well, I can think of no better way to finish up part one of this special podcast series with QQI. My thanks to Padraig and to Aoife. Tune in next time on episode 2 when we're looking at taking that next step and heading off to third level.